So we are back. It's our first broadcast of the year, but it's not a broadcast. It's not even a podcast. We are recommitting ourselves to our professional development. Eston, I said it's not a broadcast. It's not a podcast. What is it really?
It is now a popcast.
A popcast. That's right. It's insurgent professional development. We're committing ourselves this year to once again viewing pop culture. We're looking at movies. We're looking at books. We're looking at current events. We're applying MYP concepts and learner profiles, and we are trying to advance ourselves professionally. We think that this year, once again, it's going to be interesting people saying interesting things. Well, we're starting off with a strong cast this popcast, and we've got our regulars here. We've got Jim Tallman, we've got Bob Mobley, we've got Eston Dickerson, and we are off looking at a movie called Scarface.
And not the Scarface that you know, that everybody knows.
This is your grandfather's Scarface, is what this is. Maybe even your great-grandfather's Scarface. This is Scarface that was made in 1930, but not released until 1932. We're going to turn to Bob Mobley, and he's going to give us, in very broad strokes, some historical background to this movie.
Yeah, this film takes place in the early 1930s. I can't remember the exact date, 31 or 32. So this is the early 1930s. The Great Depression is on. It's a few years after the stock market crash, and the Great Depression is definitely on. Prohibition is in place, so liquor is illegal. It's illegal in the United States to buy and sell and transport alcohol. And this has been taken. This business has been taken over by the gangs, and this gives the gangs of New York and across the country money and power and political power, and that's the background, and that's Scarface. He's one of these gangsters.
All right, and so what we know to be true is whenever we're talking about a historical era, there are people that are trying to express what was going on. They're doing that through music, they're doing that through books, and they're certainly doing that through film. And this is going to be an example of people trying to express the issues of the day through film. From Variety, August 1932, here's part of the review when Scarface first came out. It says, Scarface contains more cruelty than any of its gangster picture predecessors, but there's always a squarer for every killing. The blows are always softened by judicial preachments and sad endings for sinners. So let's talk about some themes. Let's talk about some characters. Let's talk about some events from the 1930s. Let's start with some questions like this. So we're saying that one of the things we want to do this year is recommit ourselves to professional development. Are movies a good way to bring awareness to social issues? Let me throw it out there. Is this a good way for people to be expressing themselves? Is this a good way for us to try to look back through the film lens to see what was going on? Jim Tallman, what do you think? Film, a good way or not good way to express or bring awareness to social issues?
I think it is, especially in modern America with modern communication and how rarely do all Americans see the same thing. Movies are one example of where that's still not the norm, where most Americans are, do encounter whatever movies that may come out at the time. I'm reminded of what's the $1 Million Baby, which came out a few years ago about euthanasia, which was another movie that talks about new changes in society, and I think that movies are a great way to bring awareness to social events, social issues. I guess it's how does the movie maker paint that social issue? Of course, with movies, with social issues, they try to make a point. With this movie, whether it was anti or pro-gun, or whether it was anti or pro 18th Amendment, they try to make a point. Now, whether or not those points are made are different. And oftentimes, in any situation, if people go into a discussion or a movie with their own personal beliefs or opinions about whatever social issue may be the topic. And rarely do movies like this or discussions or books change people's opinions unless they really, really, really hit home. And that's kind of what I felt with $1 Million Baby, how that really hit home because you're not expecting what you see. Whereas this one, it was just your run-of-the-mill, shoot-'em-up gangster movie. Now, The difference, though, being we are children of the late 20th century, early
Right.
21st century, and geez, you see stuff like this on PBS nowadays.
Yeah.
Whereas in 1932, one must assume that your average moviegoer was not used to seeing movies like this.
All right, more on that later. That's a great introduction to some of the stylistic elements of the film. Eston, let me put it to you this way, just to get you to react. I'm going to go so far as to say that movies are the best way to bring awareness to social issues.
I don't know if it's the best way, but it is a good way. Sorry. I have a problem just with the whole idea of just awareness. We just had that huge social media ALS Raise Awareness campaign. And I always feel like, it's good to raise awareness, but there's never action, it seems like. So even if you're watching a movie and you raise awareness, if there's no action that follows, is there really... what's the point?
Doesn't matter. Well, that's a great point, too. So maybe we do raise the awareness, but there needs to be some other steps. Bob, let's bring you into this conversation, and you can talk about that, but if you'd also like to discuss if movies are a good way to analyze historical events, maybe bring that into the conversation as well.
Yeah, I think that I think they are both good ways to raise awareness to social issues, but also a great way to educate about historical perspectives and historical events. One, I think that film is almost always a reflection of the contemporary society in which that produces it. And so when people complain about violence in film or sex in film, film tends to reflect the society that is making the film. And so our films are violent because we live in a violent society. And I think that future historians will look back, as we're looking back at Scarface, and they're saying Scarface is produced because of the violence that was happening at the time. And so in that way, to the contemporary society, and Scarface does this, it's calling for action. It says, this is your society, this is your government, what are you going to do about it? And in that way, it's almost, there's a public service message in Scarface. But also, from an historical perspective, I think that film is a great way to educate students or just the public on historical events and historical perspectives.
Now, I know that there's no way that we're going to take class time to show this entire movie, whether we're teaching U.S. history or government or economics, and certainly there's applications with all of those disciplines. But let's say that we were going to maybe in an after-school venue provide enrichment and show the movie, or ask students to watch it on their own and then discuss it. What kind of pitfalls are there? What kind of things would we need to be concerned about as we use a tool like this in the classroom? Jim, you use a lot of film in that kind of a way. What sort of potential problems do we need to be aware of as we go down this path?
I just think perspective. I think it's really hard for students to disassociate themselves from 2014. I don't think they realize that life is different in another place, another time. I almost feel like students just care about here and now. Carpe diem sees today, and don't seize what has happened in the past, and worry not about the future. And I think when you provide something like this as a supplemental tool, they will be romanticized by the violence because it's interesting, and the point made by the movie, I think, would fall on mostly deaf ears.
I think they think the violence was cartoony. Like, it's not... some of the violence that you see nowadays in a movie, like in a Saw or something like that, is just so graphic.
Or
and
even
this,
Untouchables or something.
Yeah, like there's no blood. It's all kind of done. A lot of it's done off screen, so you don't really see it. I think they just kind of think it was more silly than impactful.
Which is too bad, because the one scene where the machine gun is firing and you see the calendar flipping.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's
nice.
really neat.
It's a nice transition.
And to me, that as someone that was aware of what was going on at the time, to me that was had much more weight than any kind of just gore that you would see in a movie. The gore for gore's purposes, I think, means nothing. Whereas seeing a machine gun and the flipping calendar, thinking, oh my goodness, this is a continual problem.
Yeah, I thought the just in terms of like a cool shot, the Valentine's Day massacre. I thought that was just the shadows on the wall. I thought it was really cool. Look to it.
Yeah, stylistically, in terms of how the filmmaker just makes these scenes. That's the first time I noticed the X's in this film. I mean, he really shows the X there before that killing.
I didn't get the X until, and this is actually my favorite scene in it, I didn't get the X until the bowling scene. And I thought that bowling scene was really cool. And that's when I saw that X and I was like, hey, there's actually been an X
time.
every single time. So it's that cumulative effect of how it kind of builds up on you.
Just tangent off the X. If you watch The Departed, that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, there's also an X theme in that one. And I don't know if it comes from this movie, but they do a similar thing.
Now, I like what you all did there because I asked about the potential problems and the pitfalls of using film, and actually what you told me about were some opportunities with using film, and that's a nice transition. That's a nice shift from problem to opportunity, and you brought up this idea of perspective, and certainly one of our MYP concepts, if not maybe the most essential of MYP concepts, this idea of perspective with whatever that we're looking at. And as we endeavor to do these podcasts and this professional development, I think that we'll certainly encounter that again. Let's use perspective then to go to this next point. I'm going to come at you from a very specific perspective, and I'm going to make another one of my statements and ask for some response to it. I'm going to say that Scarface, the character Tony Camonte, is an American hero. And I'd like to hear some response to that. Agree, disagree, and tell me why. He's an American hero.
Well, I mean, when I taught U.S. history, the first day of class, I talked about the famous and the infamous.
Yeah.
And about these people that did whatever was necessary to achieve the American dream. Now, if we want to put morals onto the American dream, that's one thing. But he did exactly what we perceive to be the American dream. He saw a need, he saw a niche, and he took advantage of it. He did what was ever necessary to achieve his goals. That is the American dream. Now here we sit. He did it with violence, but George Washington did it with violence.
Okay.
You know, he did. I mean, so just because I know it's kind of hard to equate the two, but those that are men of power have done things. Most of them probably that their mothers wouldn't be none too proud of. And I don't see how this is any different. I think you're right. I think he is an American hero, much the way that the character he's based on, Al Capone, was. I mean, he was an American hero of his time. People adored Al Capone, and this man is no different.
He's a captain of industry. And yes, violence results, but any more violence than, say, Rockefeller or...
Yeah, he's a robber baron. I mean, what's the difference?
Yeah. Bob? What do you think?
Well, I think he's an anti-hero.
Okay.
I have trouble calling him a hero.
Okay.
George Washington, his violence was in a military situation. And I have trouble calling him an American hero because, he does damage to others in his pursuit of the American dream. Overt, violent damage to others in pursuit of his American dream. And so I would call him an anti-hero, although I probably don't even actually have a clear perception of what an anti-hero is. I find it hard to root for Tony. I really do. They don't give us much to work for. He's not particularly smart. He's, Al Capone, I think, did things in the community that got him PR points, and we don't see Tony doing those.
They don't really give him a character other than, he's basically a runaway train. He gets started going.
He's a force of nature.
Yeah, he just cannot stop, and it has no other character besides that.
Well, I'm going to disagree here respectfully. You said he's not smart, and I'm not sure that I agree with that. He's uneducated. But I think he's very smart. I think that we can really point to an awful lot of intelligent decisions that he makes to rise to the top. And I think, of course, what we're saying is there are different kinds of intelligences, and that is to be investigated. So let's use our IB Learner profile. We all have copies here in front of us, of course, and we're taking a look at some of these terms, and I'd like to just kind of run through some of them and see what you think. Is he a communicator? Is he successful at communication?
Well, he communicates with the muzzle of a gun.
Yeah. He sure does. He's a leader of men.
People get the point.
Yeah. Eston, what do you think? Communicator?
I don't think it's a communicator in the healthy IB way. But
okay.
Like I said, his sister got the point that you probably shouldn't be hanging around with guys when he killed her husband.
Yeah. Yeah, but listen to this. These individuals understand and express ideas and information confidently and creatively in more than one language and in a variety of modes of communication. I think he does that. Now, it does go on to say they work effectively and willingly in collaboration with others. I'm not sure
His
he makes that
secretary.
point. Yeah. Yeah, I liked that guy.
He
that
was not a communicator.
Yeah, not a good communicator at all. Is Tony Camonte a thinker? Be fair. Is he a thinker?
You can't be where he ends up without being a thinker. You still roll into that. I mean, he is Darwinian at best. He is survival of the fittest, and he survives because he is most fit, because he's a thinker. He sees a goal, and whatever steps are necessary to get there, he takes those steps. To me, that's very introspective.
Okay.
And to make reasoned, ethical decisions.
All right.
Zing.
Okay.
So
So
no,
what's ethical?
I think that he is. That's going to have to be another podcast. I think that he is. He reacts well. I think he is instinctive.
Yes.
But I wouldn't call him a thinker. This creatively uses thinking skills creatively to recognize and approach complex problems. He solves his problems one way,
He takes the easy
with
way.
violence, and so I don't call him a thinker.
Like if he was a real thinker, he'd find a quote unquote legal way to. He'd be a senator or mayor of
But
Chicago.
you're talking about a guy that comes from nothing and is able to work his way up through the underworld, become one of the most powerful people in all Chicago. To me, that's extraordinary.
I agree with Jim. I will say this, though. On the next several ones, I'm not sure we're going to be able to give him much credit. I'm not sure that he's balanced.
Yeah.
You said introspective, but I'm not sure that he's reflective or caring or open-minded. And so maybe what we're saying is this. Maybe, again, going back to Jim's point.
He's a risk taker.
Yeah, he's a risk taker. You can be successful, but success for the sake of success alone, maybe that's not really the goal. And maybe when we talk about the American dream and we lionize some of these people throughout history, even ones that aren't as extreme as Tony Camonte, maybe we're making a mistake. Maybe applying this learner profile really does have quite a bit of validity.
Yeah, but it's success for success' sake, not what we're taught.
It is.
If you walk out in the hallway,
Traditionally.
and ask a kid to listen to the music, what's the one thing they're probably singing about is money.
You're right.
Cars.
I'm
being
suggesting
rich just to be rich
Yeah.
seems to be what we're going for.
Like the whole make it rain thing.
Yeah.
Making it rain because I want to show how rich and powerful I am, not because I want to feed some poor person.
Yeah.
Well,
Or take care of your family. Yeah.
And you said, that's how we've been taught. And again, as we talk about professional development, maybe the issue is that the entire focus of our teaching ought to change so that that's not the lesson that's being sent. It's going to be sent by popular culture. There's very little we can do about that, but maybe from an educational standpoint, there are things that could change. Thoughts on that? What about this? So another thing we talk about in the MYP is the idea of relationship, and we do see Tony in relationship with several characters. We see him in relationship to his bosses, both Big Louie and Johnny Lovo, his sister, Cheska, Guino, his best friend, his girlfriend, and all these things almost require air quotes because I don't think this guy has exactly human relationship, but Poppy, his girlfriend, his mother, and authority. Choose one of those people that he would have a relationship with and run with it. Eston, which one do you want to talk about?
Just like any of them, like his bosses, right?
Okay.
But anybody he comes in contact with is just there to get him to the next step.
Okay.
Like he uses them.
Even his mother.
And the mom, he just doesn't. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess respect. Like she hates everything he's doing, and he can't stop even for love of mother.
Disregards.
Yeah, but the boss is disposable. He kills his best friend. Everybody in his life, his secretary, dies. They're just there to further his goal.
Expendable.
I think it's interesting that his father is not a character in this film. And it made me wonder if Big Louie and Johnny Lovo are father figures to him.
Yeah.
What's that say about his relationship with his father? Because his father's absent in the film, and so we have to kind of discern what his father was like and what his relationship might have been like with his father. And so he kills his father figures, and he demeans the females. And so, in terms of relationships, Tony's got some work to do in the counselor's office.
Well, Al Capone was the same. He didn't really have a father figure. He had Johnny Torrio, I think was the man's name, that became his father figure when Al Capone was an underling in the underworld of Chicago. And in the end, Johnny Torrio, he gets shot and he ends up retiring. He's not killed by Al Capone, but I see a lot of similarity there. That the relationship that he builds is a very rocky one, because what's the idea that you have a child to replace you? You know, and I kind of feel like that's what we have here. Is he is there to replace people.
You know, it's interesting because we talked about sort of the impetus behind this character being a force of nature and all that. He's kind of a child as well. He's very much a child.
Very childlike.
Yeah, shows a lot of glee and joy at bright, shiny objects.
He loves shooting that gun off.
Loves shooting the gun.
And he just sees what he wants and just takes it. Like, he doesn't, you know, it's like a kid walking to the
Impulse.
store and just snacking something off the
Is
shelf.
this part of the appeal of a character like Tony Camonte and part of the appeal of these gangster movies in general, either during the 1930s or even some of the more... Does that appeal to us? It's what we can't be. We're forced to live within these rules and these limits and these structures, and he doesn't have to. He gets to be a child. Is that why we like him, or do we like him for other reasons as a character?
It might be. That might be our obsession with anti-heroes, is that we can... While we sit within the confines of our lives and the rules of our daily lives, we can watch them take what they want. They're men of action, and so maybe we do kind of seize on that, and maybe we create anti-heroes because they do what we can't do.
Well, we didn't even talk in the hallway. When I was watching the Scarface, I'm like, this guy seems a lot like Heath Ledger as the Joker. Like I said, force of nature.
Yeah.
I think Joker might have a little bit more charisma than this guy, but I was like, these guys are really similar. That kind of helped me get through maybe some of the drier parts of the movie, too.
I think that for the time, this guy had a lot of charisma.
Yeah.
I think that for the time, I think that you saw a lot of very flat, very traditional acting. And this Paul Muni, he's kind of out there.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's chewing the scenery.
Yeah, it's a very volatile performance for him.
And as part of that, like, because the first talkie was, 29? Is that right? Something like that. So, I mean, they've only been making them a few years with, people actually talking and not just acting with their bodies. So I wonder when actual acting like we would like it today comes around.
Yeah, and that's another thing about perspective. I can appreciate the artistic value of this movie and the message of this movie, but I have to say, perspective-wise, looking at it, it's not a movie that I really enjoy just sitting watching. There are parts of it that I certainly respect, but I'm not sure I really enjoyed that. One of the things I'd asked you guys to do, and I don't know if you did, but I said, let's try to describe Tony in a 6-word sentence. Let's try to boil him down into 6 words. Anybody give that a shot? Bob, did you give it a shot?
A 6-word sentence.
Yeah.
Tony is a menace to society.
I like it. That's very good. Eston, did you give it a shot?
I just said he was raised wrong. Like,
all right.
Somebody messed up along the way.
Now, this is interesting. Not only is that a 6-word sentence, but that actually gets into some other things that we can talk about, why he acts the way he does. Jim, did you give it a shot, or did you pass on that
I got it. A man of action and movement.
A man of action movie. That's very nice. I said Tony lives a psychotic American dream. Yeah. So I tried to bring all that in there. Is it fair to say, I'm going to make another one of my famous statements, is it fair to say that this guy's insane? Is he mentally imbalanced? Can he be all the things that you said, Jim, that are positive and achieve these goals and this level of success? Is he mentally unbalanced or not?
I just think he's pathetically immature.
Okay.
I don't think that makes him imbalanced. As we see at the end, when he realizes what he's done, when he realizes he's lost everybody, now he's lost even his sister, like his one true confidant.
Yeah.
And I think he almost has an epiphany. I don't think that means he's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows what's going on. He understands what's going on around him. I just think he just misplaces his own relevance. Or the lack thereof of his relevance in other people's lives.
Eston voted up or down. This man's insane.
I guess he's not totally insane. I think he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He just makes bad choice after bad choice on purpose.
Yeah, which may, again, and choice as one of our MYP concepts, it's a matter of perspective. I don't know if he is making bad choices. They are choices. Now, at the very end, we could argue that, but the choices that get him where he wants to be, maybe those are good choices. Bob, is this man insane?
I don't think he's insane. I think I agree with Esten. I don't think he was raised right.
Yeah.
And he's certainly making bad choices. Insane, I don't think he's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds great. Let's do this. I would like to know, and we're going to apply some more MYP kind of stuff. So also now in front of us, we have our global context papers. So we are looking for a way to organize our thoughts, a lens through which we can view the message that is being sent in this movie, Scarface. Which of these global contexts do you think would work best? Anybody who wants to grab one and go, let's do it.
I'm going orientation in time and space.
All right. Well, can I read that before you go on?
Sure.
It says that students are going to explore personal histories, turning points in humankind, and the interconnectedness of individuals as well as societies.
Let's remember where our nation is in 1932. Our unemployment rate in 1932 is near 25%. We are at the tail end of prohibition. As a matter of fact, when prohibition is passed in this country, alcohol use actually spiked. It peaked. It went up a lot. And people drank during Prohibition that would have never drank prior to Prohibition. And so Al Capone is seen as a hero. This man here would be seen as a hero. And so I think what the movie is trying to do is trying to... I think Al Capone's all but deified. And I think what they're trying to accomplish here is they're trying to take that away. They're trying to make him human. They're trying to bring him down and put him in the underworld where most Americans don't place him. So I think Americans today would see this and would help them to understand, what point was trying to be made. Because I think Americans are ignorant as to what's actually going on in the city of Chicago, what's actually going on in New York or wherever. And I think when they see this movie, they realize, wait a second, it's not as glorious as we seem to think it is. Al Capone isn't living this wonderful life, whereas I can't feed my children.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm better off as one that can't feed my children, while Al Capone is going to be ending up dead or in prison.
Very nice. Let's go with a different global context. Bob, what would you go with?
I think I would go with identities and relationships.
Tell us why.
Students explore identity, beliefs, and values, personal health, and human relationships. And in many ways, as you've already pointed out, Andy, this is kind of a relationship movie. And so I think that we could spend a long time talking about Tony and his relationships with the father figures in his life, with his sister, and so I would definitely focus on identities and relationships because of the human relationship aspect, beliefs and values. Clearly, there's a values discussion to be had here in terms of society's values. And you could link that with Prohibition and the banishment of alcohol, but also personal values and personal beliefs and choices.
All right, Esten, anything you want to add?
Bob stole my answer.
All right, let's talk about some of the related concepts. We've talked about the big concepts a little bit with perspective and whatnot. So over on this next page that we're looking at, we've got the related concepts. We have causality, resources, disparity and equity, innovation, revolution, trade, power, networks, poverty, conflict, scarcity, citizenship. Let me go with one, and then we can certainly add others. I want to talk about poverty. So, Bob, you did a great job at the top of the show, and you gave us the broad strokes, which is exactly what I asked for. But I want to go deeper with that, and I guess maybe this would be a little bit of causality as well. Let's talk about poverty. I'm going to say that the reason that these gangs are developing, the reason that these gangs are looking for the need and looking for the niche that Jim spoke about, at the end of the day, it's because of poverty. Poverty has led to this situation. Poverty is the motivating factor. It is poverty that leads to every action and event that takes place in this movie. And I'm throwing it out there and seeing if anybody wants to agree with me or disagree with me. But I'm going to say that that's my concept, poverty for the movie. Let's get some reaction from you guys.
Well, Tony obviously comes from an impoverished household, and if you were to take that angle, you could say that poverty drives Tony and Tony drives the movie.
Okay.
And so I would accept your premise only in that Tony comes from poverty. The situation that he's in, the environment that he's in, I'm not sure that's caused. I don't think prohibition is caused because of poverty.
Okay.
But certainly Tony comes from poverty, and the movie's about Tony, and so I would agree with you from that point.
All right, Eston, you can either agree with me as poverty being a major concept here and talk more about that, or if you'd like to choose one of these others from the list and talk about that a little bit, that would be appropriate.
I like poverty as well. I mean, talk about how when you're down and out, you're going to do some desperate things. The cost of you doing something outlandish to, get yourself ahead is a lot lower. Even something little like, if you're hungry, is it okay to steal a loaf of bread or something like that?
Absolutely.
I think power also, though, once he got a taste of that power, that's what kind of shoots him down, that hill, that runaway train. Just that once he gets it, he doesn't know what to do with it. He's a dog chasing cars and just doesn't know what to do once he's got one.
Jim, you can talk about those two or something else completely. Take it in any direction you want.
I think it's causality.
Okay.
I think he sees opportunity, and I think you don't have to be poor to see opportunity. You can be rich and see opportunity. What's Madoff? Great example.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't poor, but he wanted to take millions upon millions of dollars from regular people. So you don't have to be poor to make these types of mistakes. So I see it more as a cause-effect relationship.
All right. When we first meet the character of Poppy, she is the mistress of Tony's second boss, and soon she becomes enamored and interested in Tony and becomes his mistress. My basic question, what's up with this girl? What's her story? What motivates her? How do we, and if you want to use MYP kind of terminology, that's fine, but if not, just kind of explain to me what's going on with her. I don't get her.
She seems like she's just as immature as Tony is, like moving on to the next newer model of, successful, powerful guy. I don't know, not the one you want to take home to mom, I guess.
Yeah, certainly not my mom.
Poppy, I think, also probably from a broken home. Probably did not have the best upbringing.
Yeah.
You might ask about some of the relationships in her past that that drive her to this. I think she's bored initially. With every indication is that with Johnny, she's bored. Mm-hmm. When she meets Tony, she's clearly bored with Tony, and she's not much interested in anything, and she wants those men to take their business outside of her boudoir. Later, though, she is impassioned. When she clearly falls in love with Tony, she's in love with Tony in a way that we don't see with Johnny Lovo. And so if I were to ask Poppy a question, I would say, why do you love Tony? What do you love about this guy?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if she felt the same way about Johnny when they first started,
Sure.
when Johnny was up-and-comer, and
Sure.
then, the high wears off, and now, Tony.
One thing she does is that she tends to laugh at Tony.
Yeah.
When she says, some of your stuff is kind of feminine, he's like, yeah, you like it?
Yeah.
And she kind of laughs, she giggles at him, and she says it later in the film when his apartment's gaudy, and he's like, yeah, you like that?
She says you're funny.
You're funny, yeah. So I think she laughs at Tony, or she likes Tony because he's funny.
So let me throw this out there too. So Poppy as a representation, again, of us and why we like gangster movies and why we like gangsters. So the people of the time or people now, they're bored. They're bored, and this is kind of exciting. This is an amusing thing. It's something different. It's kind of a forbidden fruit sort of thing. Is this another reason why it's why Poppy maybe likes Tony, but is it also why the American people like gangsters? Any element of that? Am I onto something there, Jim? What do you think? Is that something that's attractive to us, this forbidden fruit, this excitement?
Well, I think it's innate. I think it's it's the animal in us. It's the fight or flight, and we spend so much of our time disassociating ourselves from the animalia that we are. And I think it's why we play sports. It's why we do things that raise our adrenaline. And I think it's why people like scary movies. Or during Halloween, you go to a haunted house. You're not going to get attacked by a knife. Well, at least you hope you're not going to be attacked by a knife wielding maniac.
I guess it's possible.
But you go because you want your adrenaline, pumping.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we see with Poppy, and I think that's what Americans like, is something that can get their adrenaline pumping, but know after 2 hours that they can go home and be safe.
I think Bob, you made a point about Johnny Lovo and how maybe she was that interested in him to begin with. I wonder about that, because that character strikes me as a very different kind of personality than Tony. I think he's more of a traditional businessman, and to use an MYP term in the negative, he's not a risk taker, and that's why he doesn't succeed. This is all about risk taking in terms of profile and how that actually can pay off for you. Eston, go for it.
I go the opposite way. I think as a businessman, you have to take a risk. I mean, that's part of what being an entrepreneur is.
Yeah.
I think Johnny has taken the kind of risk that MYP would
approve of.
Okay. These are healthy, calculated risks. Tony is just like, I'm going to bungee jump, and I don't really know if it's tied onto my leg or not. Yeah. I'm just going to hop in and see what happens. And
ill-considered risk-taking for Tony.
He's a fool.
Okay. Bob, you brought up the idea of asking Poppy a question. What if we were going to ask Tony a question? Let's say, as we've often done, we've got him on a talk show, and he's sitting across the table from us, and we're having a conversation with Tony. Anybody jump in here. What do we ask Tony? What do we want to know from him?
If you were a tree, what kind of a tree would you be? No, not that.
No, it's not a risky question.
I'd ask him where he started. How did he start? It's your first time on the Tonight Show. Tell us about your career. How'd you get started?
Yeah, there could be a prequel, actually, about Scarface.
Young Scarface.
Young Scarface. Maybe even like a WB television show. That's what we could do there. Other questions that we might ask Tony Camonte. Anything we want to know from him if we had the chance?
I'd like to know, where is he without prohibition?
Yeah.
Like, is he Farmer John, without prohibition? Does that give him the avenue to what he would perceive as greatness? Or would he maybe he would be not the anti-hero that Bob discussed, but maybe he would be the hero. Maybe he is a hero in World War II or something like that.
Yeah.
If he's not provided this stage that was prohibition and the immorality that existed in this country during the 1920s, early 1930s.
You raise a couple of very interesting points there. This guy could be a hero in World War II, right? I mean, this is the guy that charges the Germans, just laughing maniacally, spraying them with his machine gun, and he doesn't even, no concern at all for his own personal safety. This guy could be a hero in that way. Am I wrong, or?
No.
Yeah, he could also just be a two-bit thug in prison for the rest of his life. If I could ask him any question, I think it would be, if I had him on the couch with the microphone in front of me, I'd say, "Will you ever have enough? When will you have enough?"
Yeah, I like that.
Enough?
Yeah, you raised this thing about him being a two-bit thug in prison, and I said he could be a hero in World War II. Is he a coward? At the end, in the original ending, he's kind of a coward, isn't he?
He is.
Is he a coward? Can he be a coward and succeed? There's a dichotomy here I can't quite reconcile.
It was another bad risk. He's like, I could maybe get, he's, what am I trying to say? He doesn't want to stop what he's doing, right? And that's his goal. He wants to keep that up, so he's going to try any stupid little trick he can do, and of course it doesn't pay off for him, but I think that keeps right in line with his character, though.
Okay.
I don't think he's a coward. I think he believes he's untouchable.
Yeah.
And I think the steel windows at the end are a great example. He feels all I got to do is close these windows and they can't get to me. Like he's in his cocoon.
Yeah.
And then he realizes, well, like a butterfly, he must leave his cocoon.
Well, and those steel doors or shutters or whatever you want to call them, they actually end up causing him a problem because if I remember this, the bullet
ricochets
and kills the sister. So that's actually he's a participant in his own undoing.
So maybe the point is his perceived invincibility is what brought down everybody else around him.
Yeah, and himself.
And himself.
Now, there is a third alternate ending to this film.
Yeah, tell us about that.
And I only know this because I read a biography of Howard Hawks years ago. He's the director of the film. I had not seen this film until just prior to this podcast, so I was thankful for the opportunity to actually finally see it. In this biography of Hawks, the original ending to this film has him with his beloved machine gun firing away at the cops, and when they finally shoot him and he dies, He falls to the ground, and the screen fades to black with the click, click, click of him still pulling the trigger of the machine gun.
That's a stronger ending than either of the two.
Much stronger, and it was not allowed.
Yeah.
That's the reason they filmed it the way they did.
Yeah, that's annoying to me because that's a stronger ending than either of the other two. And the one that now I think would be considered the real ending, I just think he acts out of character there. That cowardly play where he's just sort of gibbering, I don't think that's him.
Yep, and that's the power of government censorship during this period, is that they knew they couldn't get away with glorifying him with this kind of an ending, and so they made. Howard Hawks wasn't particularly happy about it either, from what I recall.
Let's talk about this idea of censorship. Let's go with this theme. Censorship at this time was actually a good thing because these movies were inspiring people to be gangsters. So government censorship was a positive thing. It was good that they were going to keep that artistic vision from being represented to the people. Eston, what do you think? Is that right?
I mean, I don't think it's ever a good thing. But I mean, if that was a true thing, then censorship would be good now. Go back to the music. If they're not talking about money, they're talking about selling drugs, killing people, and kids in the hallway think that is a viable life option, one that's like, I should probably go ahead and do this. If you're going to censor something, if you're going to censor a gangster movie, you should censor the music too.
Did this movie inspire and educate gangsters?
I think that's a cop-out. I don't think a 17-year-old, 16-year-old watch this movie and thinks, I'm going to go do this. And if they did, that's not the type of person that would have been very successful in that arena. They're the first one to get taken out by the next flying bullet.
That's definitely the perception, is that that it would inspire other people to act more like Scarface, and that's part of the change of the ending, and that's part of that text intro that we see at the beginning of the film. That was not originally part of the film either.
Well, video games are the same way. Yeah. People always talk about how video games inspire violence. I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't believe that for 1 second. I mean, excuse me, at least Eston and I grew up in an age where we were shooting people on video games, and I'm not shooting people now. Now, of course, maybe I'm different than the average American, but I don't see the average American playing, Bond, and then grabbing a gun and going shooting somebody because they learned it on Bond. People that go shoot people, they shoot people for different reasons, because of poverty, like you said, or for a myriad of reasons. I don't think it's because they played in a video game, and I don't think people are going to join gangs because they saw the movie Scarface.
I think that films and video games, though, can desensitize a child to perceptions, to images of violence, and I think that is a conversation that can be had.
I'm being serious when I say this. I got desensitized to violence a little bit with this movie. I mean, just the non-stop, relentless cacophony of the machine gun fire. I mean, I just got to the point where it was background noise. It was no longer shocking to me, and maybe that was part of what they were trying to do. In no way do I consider myself an expert on cinematography, but I did notice this: the ending that was, I guess, alternate ending that was mandated, where we see the judge and we see the execution. It doesn't even look like the same movie. None of that shadow, none of that cool angle of camera shots. I mean, it's like the most just public service announcement, cheap thing added on. I thought that was very interesting. Anything in your readings, Bob, about Howard Hawks? Was he also upset with that, I'm assuming?
I don't recall him being upset with that, but you can clearly see that this was filmed after the fact. It's thrown in at the end. I don't think Paul Muni's
He's not. You never see him
from the back.
And so the actor himself may not even be around. So clearly this is a situation in which they wanted to show that there are consequences to the actions of Scarface, that you can't just get away with it, that you're gonna pay for your sins, in the worst way.
I don't feel that was out of left field, though, because to me that reminded me a lot of the scene earlier on when the newspaper man is being told that he shouldn't do these headlines, and then he goes off and he basically gives the same rant that the judge gives at the end of the movie.
That might have been was that.
So I don't know. Maybe
I don't know that.
And then but then that does have the cinematography thing where he looks straight at the camera.
Right.
He's looking right at you, I'm talking to you, watching the movie, guy. And to me that reminded me is So similar to the end when the judge was giving that same speech.
I wonder if that was added too. I don't know the answer to that, but I actually, that thing you're talking about where he looks at the camera, I found that disquieting. That takes me out of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure, now that you say that, I'm not sure that that actually is a part of the original.
I think it seems like it's something that's thrown in later. And the whole, a lot of the scenes with the newspaper publisher and the culpability of the press in this at the beginning where they make up this headline, make sure it says gang war, gang war, gang war. And I think that's kind of a theme that it's an underlying theme of this film. It's not overt, but they certainly talk about kind of the culpability of the press and the responsibility of the press in this.
Yeah, definitely pointing fingers in all kinds of different ways. So in our insurgent professional development way, let's say that we were bringing Scarface into the classroom. I just did some classes here, if there were others you could think of, but I thought psychology, U.S. history, government, economics, world history here in our social studies department. What kind of a lesson plan? How could you use this? Could you use this as a jumping off point, as an anchor for any kind of a lesson? Anybody who's got an idea, please feel free to jump in and share.
I don't think I would use the entire film in a U.S. history class, but certainly within the context of Prohibition and the rise of gangs, you could use some of it to show the vacuum that's created when Prohibition's enacted, and how that's filled by gangsters. So I think I could use clips in U.S. history. I could see that happening.
We could use clips in government. We do an entire thing where we talk about not just the 18th Amendment, but we kind of throw it out and say a lot of times there are good intentions by government, but they've got negative consequences. And of course the 18th Amendment works well there, but there are others that you can do this with. And so we say, look through the amendments and talk about the potential negative consequences. And this one comes up greatly, the failure of government, the overtaxing of the police, the overtaxing of the jail system. And so as a great exemplar of government failure, that would work well for us. Eston, any way you could use it in econ or for your U.S. history?
Of stuff. You could talk about competition. You could talk about black markets. You could talk about costs and benefits of your decisions. Talk about how he made a choice to kill his friend. Clearly, though, the benefit to him was greater than the cost of losing your friend / brother-in-law.
Yeah.
So just kind of measuring, against a quote-unquote normal person's costs and benefits versus just other people even around you.
Very nice. Opportunity cost to application. Jim, anything that we haven't touched on that you thought about?
Well, with world history, I'd probably talk about diffusion and immigration and the movement of people across the world for opportunity and, what those opportunities may be, whether they be positive or negative.
Since you bring that up, is this an anti-immigrant movie in any way? Are there strains of anti-immigration? I know when we were first getting ready to watch this, Bob, you asked me that question. After I had watched it, you said, did they kind of beat that drum? And I told you I didn't want to answer the question until you'd watched it, because I'd like for that to be a discussion. Is this an anti-immigrant movie?
They don't make... the one guy who has, the blatant accent, he sounds like Super Mario, is the dumbest person in the entire... The secretary. Yeah. Can't answer a phone, can't write, can't barely think, So I don't think that's a particularly bright light. I'm sure it's not intentional. It's probably just for, this is our comedic effect, but looking back, I'm like, ooh.
But the newspaper editor, when he goes on his rant, talks about immigrants.
Yeah,
that's true.
He says that we need to. He talks about how this is an immigrant-run issue, and we need to deport all these people because these are not Americans that are doing this.
That's true.
And honestly, it reminds me a lot of what we hear on the news today, depending upon the news channel you turn it to. That so many of our issues that we have today in our country are immigrant-related, and so we're 80 years later, and we're still hearing the same rhetoric.
We like looking for bad guys. It's true. Bob, you had asked me the question, so now I'm asking you. In your opinion, anti-immigrant movie?
I think that, I don't know if that was the filmmaker's intention, but I think if you approach it, viewing it through the prism of, like an anti-immigrant, from an anti-immigrant stance, if you come at the movie that way, I think you can make the case that it's an anti-immigrant movie. The immigrants are most of the immigrants are the bad guys. The good guys are Anglo-Americans. See, I told you, you come back for more. Those guys are Anglo Americans. The bad guys have heavy accents. The newspaper publisher overtly says it's the immigrants, and so I think I could make a case that it was an anti-immigrant movie.
Let's not forget who makes this. I mean, Howard Hughes. I mean, L.A. in the 1930s has what they deemed was a large problem with immigrants from South America. And so there's a large anti-immigrant movement in California in both the 30s and the 40s. Of course, you got the Zoot Suit riots. And so, of course, this is not South American immigrants, but is it a coincidence that the second Scarface is a Cuban immigrant, right? And so I don't know if I'm just, grabbing straws here, but I think there is definitely a large immigrant issue, and I think Howard Hughes would have wanted that in that movie because he is gun-ho Americans, from what I know of the man, gun-ho America.
We talked earlier about movies bringing awareness to social issues, and prohibition certainly is a major social issue that is dwelled upon in this movie. Let me say this. I actually think it's more a movie about gun control than it is about prohibition. Is that fair for me to say, Eston?
I don't know. I honestly, clearly the gun, they paint it to be a very, I don't know. I know what I want to say about it. Go ahead.
Guns save the day in the end.
That's true.
The guns were the hero.
Well, the only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Right? It's interesting to me because now that we are considering the possibility that this newspaper publisher's speech is a wildly inserted scene, that's where he talks about the immigrants. That's where he actually says the word gun control.
Yeah.
And so, is it a gun control movie without that scene? I'm not sure. But with this newspaper guy coming in and making the speech that we need gun control laws, maybe you could say this is a gun control movie. The violence is certainly perpetrated with guns.
I don't know. It just makes it seem like we need people control more than gun control. And not like, you must do this, blah, blah, blah. But,
not fascism.
Yeah. Tony picked up a gun for the first time, a machine gun for the first time, and
Gleefully.
within seconds was just like, I got it.
Yeah.
I'm expert marksman with this thing now. And
that scene.
And this is the key.
Yeah.
I think if you were going to teach about gun control in your government class, your U.S. history class, and the issue, it's kind of an interesting scene to show how that tips the balance for him and how easy it is for him to access and how easy it is for him to use.
This is how I won the South Side, and this is how I won the North Side.
How empowered he feels once he has it.
Yeah.
Or when the woman throws the handgun to him.
Yeah.
Like, don't forget this. Like, why bother? I've got this.
You left your keys and your gun on the
That's
counter.
right. How about this? It's a socialist movie. I think it's a socialist movie.
Well, when you say socialist,
Yeah.
I think so many people give it a negative
Yeah,
connotation.
they do.
But if that's to me, this would be positive socialism.
You'll talk about that.
If it is about things like saving lives, gun control, if it is about ending poverty, those are issues that socialism talks about, making lives better for people. So if this is a socialist movie, I think it paints it in a positive light, not a negative light.
Yeah, I think it's an anti-capitalist socialist movie. I think that it actually speaks against the idea of that risk-taking, win at all costs, take no prisoner, anti-hero that we have in our American mythology. I think it's a socialist movie. Bob?
By portraying the capitalist Tony in a negative light?
Yes. That is exactly what I am saying.
Agree.
All right. Eston, you got thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree. And like you said, socialism, people think it's a bad word, but we have a lot of socialized stuff. Maybe we should have more.
Well, I think we're lying to ourselves if we don't say that we don't borrow some aspects of socialism.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone who who wants to say that we have there's no aspect of socialism in our society is fooling themselves.
Well, we're sitting in a public school.
Sitting in a public school,
that's socialism.
Medicare.
So why is it such a bad word then?
Well, it's exactly what Jim said. It's this idea that we have infused that word with a very negative connotation. And, of course, and this gets into something, Eston, that you don't like to talk about, but it gets into the whole Red Scare thing and the Cold War thing. That's exactly what it is. Again, we look for enemies, and we looked at the communists and the socialism and the communism. We put that all together. And that's, I think, exactly what's happened. I've got two more things, and then we better get out out of here. I'd like to say this. I'd like to say that, just submitted for your reaction, the corruption and ineptitude of the police force are responsible for gangsterism. Forget everything that I said earlier about poverty. Really, what it is the fact that this government institution of the police force is both corrupt and inept. That's why we see the events transpire in the movie that we see. Your reactions.
I can add some nuance to that.
Thank you.
In my reading of my Howard Hawks book, I can tell you that he had cops on the take in that film, and that was not allowed. And so, to add fuel to your argument, in the original version of this film, the cops were on the take.
Interesting.
And you see that in every other gangster movie
Sure
more
do.
recently. I mean, Godfather owns half the town.
Well, and historically, Al Capone, something along the lines of 85 to 90% of Chicago Police Department was actually on his books.
Well, this is why, Bob, you brought it up. This is why the Untouchables, that's why they had them. I mean, that's what the name meant, because this was unusual that there was going to be a group that could not be touched in that way. That's exactly right.
Possibly the perfect film, by the way.
I do not disagree with that in any way. That is a fantastic
That movie
movie.
borders on cheesy.
Oh, it's a great movie.
Jeez, where's your camembert?
Well, let's do this. Sort of along those same lines, Eston, you had told me that this movie is in the American Film Institute's top 10. And so let's end at least with this. If you want to add more things, we can. Is it good enough for that, in your opinion? Does it need to be in the conversation of the top 10 best movies made by American filmmakers? Eston?
No, not even close.
Why no?
I mean, just for the sole fact that I could pick 10 movies in the past 5 years that are better than this one.
That's an
You
interesting.
pick 10 in the same genre that are probably better than this one.
That's an interesting statement. Let's come back to it. Jim, what do you think? Is it in the?
I think it's tough because of bias. You know,
Yeah,
we're obviously biased to
perspective.
the age we're from, and to me, not even close. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't put this in the AFI top 1,000, but that's because of my own bias. You know, it's just too slow. It's hard to understand.
Yeah.
I mean, the cinema. It's just because of bias. It's a great movie, I'm sure, for the time, but I don't like movies in the 1930s.
Perspective and bias. And Bob, before you talk, I just want to say this. I think that I look at it and I know that it was groundbreaking. I absolutely am convinced that it was, that there was probably nothing like it that had ever been seen before. But I agree with you guys. I don't really enjoy it that much. Bob, help us out here. You're more of a film historian than I am.
I like it in the top 10 of gangster films.
Oh, that's
I'll
fair.
put it in the top 10 for gangster films. Top 10 films. The only reason I would even consider that, and I'm not even saying that I would, is that had it been filmed the way it was originally meant to be filmed,
Yeah.
that gives it more gravity as a gangster film. But also because it was a groundbreaking film. If you think of scenes that we take for granted now, the car chase scene. This car chase scene in 1930 is just a phenomenal scene.
Yeah.
When you put together how it was filmed, putting the sound together for it, moving cars, shooting back and forth at each other. And so it is a groundbreaking film for the themes of violence that it's brave enough to portray on film. I'll put it in the top 10 of gangster films.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair codicil that you put on the categorization of it. What you said about this third ending that I didn't even know about, that would change my opinion quite a bit. That's pretty cool, I'd have to say that. I don't have anything else. Anybody want to say any last words about the movie Scarface or the time period in which it is set and seeks to represent?
One last thing that I might add, in terms of a lesson plan, I would use it as a jumping off point to extend a lesson into a discussion of the war on drugs, the legalization of marijuana, as that is a topical issue for our students. And so when you talk about prohibition, your students are going to go straight to the war on drugs and legalization of drugs. And so I think that this film can be part of that.
Excellent point. Anybody else, any last comments about the movie or the time?
I'll tell you, I didn't realize. I mean, I knew it was loosely based on the newer Scarface was loosely based on this. I did not realize how closely based it was. The scene when who was it? The scene when he finds out
Guido.
that Johnny Lovo tried to have him killed.
Yeah.
And he has his buddy call.
Oh, yeah.
And so depending upon his reaction, I'll know whether or not he was the one. And I'm sitting in that scene. I even said to Esther, I was like, that's just like a scene in another movie. What is that?
It was Scarface.
Oh, that's Scarface. Was it Robert Loggia, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
Robert Loggia picks up the phone. It is Robert Loggia,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
He picks up the phone, and based on his reaction, Tony Montana knows whether or not he's the guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's Scarface. And
I need to watch the Cuban Al Pacino version again.
It's also an excellent film. Do you agree? Have you seen the?
I've
Pacino?
not.
Yeah, it's an excellent film.
That's good.
Other things, Eston, from you before we wrap this up.
No, I mean, as much as I just kind of poo-pooed the movie, I think it's worth a watch. I actually liked
Absolutely.
it. But other than that, I got nothing.
Yeah, and I agree. While not my favorite movie, it is absolutely worth a watch. There is great information and great food for thought in this movie. I hope I speak for everybody when I say, really glad to be back doing the Popcast now, and we're going to do more. So we want to thank everybody who's listened, and if anybody has any ideas for us, we'd love to hear your suggestions.
All right, see ya.